Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of the Bitcoin Staking Podcast. Today we have Willem Schroé from Botanix Labs. Willem, how are you doing today?
Hey, nice to meet everyone. I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing great. Bitcoin is at 94K today. We are entering new all-time highs, so we're in price discovery mode. It's definitely a nice feeling. Today we're going to be talking a lot about Bitcoin, the assets, but also Bitcoin, the network. So interesting conversation ahead. I think to start things off, like William, could you tell us a bit about yourself? Give us a bit your background and how you started to get interested in Bitcoin, blockchain, the Spiderchain, all of this.
Yeah, sounds good. Awesome. So I'm Willem. I grew up in Belgium. So I spent most of my life in Belgium, actually. I have a bit of a mathematics background, became national champion in mathematics in Belgium. Ended up doing electrical engineering and then researched in cryptography, basically researched in authenticated encryption. So I saw a lot of different algorithms, and that was actually my first entry into the world of Bitcoin. That was like 2013, 2014. Saw cryptography in or saw Bitcoin in my cryptography classes, which was very interesting. I actually had the same cryptography professor as Len Sasselman, for whoever believes in the Len Sasselman theory. Yeah, and then ended up working in chemicals. Lived 2 years in Saudi Arabia, and basically got fully thrown back into Bitcoin while I was in the Middle East. I saw hyperinflation happening there in Lebanon, so people get their bank accounts seized. Yeah, and very quickly put a bigger macro picture together. That's basically also when I went to business school, so that brought me to Boston. And that's where I came up with the idea for Botanix, which is now exactly 2 years ago. And I still fully believe in that vision. I think Bitcoin is by far the best money ever made. It is optimized to be the best money. And then I think the EVM is the winning virtual machine. I think the EVM has shown extreme product market fit, has produced a lot of different applications. The infrastructure is really, really big. It might not be the best, but it follows the rules of operating systems. And so I think the EVM is just a powerhouse of applications it can bring. Besides that, I believe the Bitcoin needs a decentralized layer too, especially for DeFi. And so I designed the Spiderchain, which is a decentralized layer 2 EVM, purely running on Bitcoin. So we're only connected on Bitcoin and not to anyone else. So that's a little bit the short intro.
Nice, great. I'd love to know so now we have the background. I'd love to know a bit more about exactly how Botanic started and what was exactly the vision for Botanic. You said like a decentralized L2 that could be EVM compatible. But like what gave you this idea, and what was the process in this invention?
Yeah, great question. I think the idea and the vision is way bigger. Like when you see Bitcoin as being the best money ever, I kind of want to move as fast as possible to a world where every transaction in the world happens on Bitcoin. So every B2B transaction, everyone buying a coffee. And I can see this world 100 years from now where Bitcoin is actually the money in a lot of transactions in the world. If you buy stocks today, if you buy maybe tokens or tokenized equities in the future, you'll use Bitcoin for it. And so more and more, the internet is basically taking a global permissionless network, and that needs native currency. And today we have a lot of stable coins, of course, but the stable coins are dependent on the US government either printing or not printing money. And so longer term, Bitcoin is the big sound money. And so my bigger vision is I want to see a world where everything that you see today, think about everything, right? Every transaction happens with Bitcoin as the money. And ideally, that's in a permissionless, trustless way. And I think that's absolutely possible. I don't think we have the infrastructure yet. And that's basically what we're built. So when you think about the infrastructure, we already have Bitcoin on the base layer. We know that cannot scale. No single layer one can scale to all the transactions in the world. So you need some type of scaling mechanisms. And so you then have, of course, the Lightning Network. The Lightning Network is perfect for fast prepayment. So these are like end-to-end payments if you buy a coffee or a beer in any store. But then there's a whole financial system with a lot of different type of contracts and stock exchanges, et cetera, et cetera. And the EVM is perfectly suited for that. And so you can basically start to see a world where you have the Lightning Network for the payments, where you keep majority of your savings on Bitcoin, the base layer, which is completely trustless. But then you go into like borrowing and lending protocols, buying stocks on DEXs, which are like, the new stock exchanges. And you'll do that in a permissionless global way on an EVM. And that's something that a Botanix can bring. So we see Botanix as the software infrastructure layer for a global financial system on Bitcoin. Now, if you take that as a vision, immediately you basically see that needs to be decentralized. If you want to run a global financial system, you don't want any country in the world to be able to censor that financial system. That's too much power. And so you come into the spectrum of how decentralized does your layer 2 needs to be. On Ethereum, that's very clear. Ethereum as a base layer has DeFi, is decentralized, right? So DeFi can live on Ethereum, the base layer. And then for Ethereum layer 2s, you can go very centralized. You can go single node rollups. And that's perfect because for assets like NFTs or like even a poly market or like other applications, you don't actually need that much decentralization, right? So Ethereum has a base layer for DeFi. Now, Bitcoin doesn't have that. So Bitcoin first needs a decentralized layer 2 EVM that can basically rule the global financial system. And that's basically what went into the design of what we call the Spiderchain today.
Nice. And can you go a bit deeper into like exactly like what's the what from a like a design perspective, what does the Spiderchain look like?
Yes, absolutely. So from the business vision to the more technical vision. So you want to build a decentralized layer 2 EVM. That's the goal, right? And we have seen a lot of different designs. We've seen rollups on Ethereum. We have the Lightning Network, and then there's a bunch of different sidechain designs, as we call it. And so, in essence, the Lightning Network is the only decentralized layer 2. But if you look from a very high level, 10,000 feet, the Lightning Network is basically a network of 2 out of 2 multisigs. If you and I open a channel, that's a 2 out of 2 multisig. If someone else opens a channel, that's a 2 out of 2 multisig. And so from a very high level, you have actually this beautiful network overlaying Bitcoin that exists of 2 out of 2 multisigs. And there's this funny joke in crypto, everything in the end is a multisig. And it kind of comes down to that a lot. And so the question is, if you want to build a decentralized layer 2, how do you decentralize the multisigs? And so take the idea of the Lightning Network, park that, but think very similar in that range. That's a little bit what we're trying to do with the Spiderchain. So we want to decentralize the multisigs. And how we do that is by basically creating new multisigs over time. So let's say day one, you start with 100 operators. Basically, let's say you have 100 different operators globally distributed throughout the world. They will secure one single multisig, right? You cannot go to like 10,000 operators for a single multisig because that would take too much time. That is, technology-wise, almost impossible. And so you have a single multisig secured by 100. But then you can create a new one. You create a second new multisig. Again, you randomly choose 100 operators out of the whole operator set, and they will secure multisig 2. And then you do that again for multisig 3. Again, you randomly choose 100 operators out of the total operator set, and they will secure multisig 3. And then you do that again from 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and you keep creating new multisigs. And so after a while, you have this global network of decentralized multisigs, as we call it. And that total operator set has no limit. You can go to 10,000 operators. You could go to like 1 million full operators. And that's actually how we envision like operating a decentralized layer 2 network. That's a long-term goal, of course, technology-wise, but then we have the the actual scaling roadmap, how we will start from we will start with 15 node operators, globally distributed, censorship resistant from day one, fully decentralized sequencers from day one. So we will start with 15 different sequencers, which is unique already. This is a very difficult problem to solve. And then we will slowly over time scale from 15 to 100. That's an easy step to go to. And then from 100, we can go to 1,000 and a few thousand. Now, if you want to be decentralized and you run a smart contract layer, you need consensus. And so that's a little bit, I guess, the tie into this conversation. You need consensus. Now, for a second layer on Bitcoin, the best consensus there is, by far the best consensus, is actually using Bitcoin as an asset to secure the network. There is no more decentralized asset in the world as Bitcoin today. And for a base layer for the money, proof of work is by far the best. I fully believe that. But for a second layer, proof of stake is just so much better. Basically, all the issues that you have with proof of stake on a layer 1 are solved if you build it as a layer 2 on a proof of work. And so this whole network of decentralized multisigs will basically be secured by a proof of stake with Bitcoin as a staking.
Got it. So you're using the security of the layer 1 as the base layer, but then on top of that, you're building something with different trusted security assumptions built on proof of stake. We'll go a bit deeper into the roadmap a bit later. I want to touch on something that you briefly mentioned. It was basically the other scaling solutions that exist today, like Lightning and so on. Today, there is actually more Bitcoin liquidity on Ethereum with just wrap BTC than on the Lightning network. I think it tells something, but I think more broadly, we haven't seen yet a Bitcoin scaling solution or a Bitcoin expressive layer, something that would be beyond just the money, a Bitcoin expressive layer that will basically have as much of the adoption as Ethereum or some other L1. What do you think is the post-mortem on all of these experiments in terms of scaling solution? We've seen there was the Omni protocol way back in the past. There was there were more recently, depends, but there was for example Woodstock I remember was the first EVM sidechain or EVM layer 2 on top of Bitcoin. Why haven't these solutions, for example, more recently, there's been Liquid, who had a lot of mind share, but not a lot of TVL and block space usage. What lessons do these quote unquote failures have taught you, and how do you think that the Bitcoin community has learned with all of these experiments in the past?
Yeah, I think there's a few things that tie into it. I think timing, of course. I think a lot of people who are very pro Bitcoin and active in the Bitcoin space around 2015, 2016 actually moved away. So a lot of that activity of builder activity actually moved towards Ethereum because it was really hard to build on Bitcoin. And so I think you had this black hole or wasteland in Bitcoin around 2020 when there was very few people basically building on Bitcoin, or almost no one. Most of the activity was basically outside of Bitcoin, and gave rise, of course, to DeFi Summer and others. And so I think one is just a lot of the attention moved away. A lot of the builders moved away from Bitcoin to Ethereum. I think I fully agree from a market perspective. There is today, I think, absolutely zero applications, big applications that you can generally say have fully reached product market fit in the world of Bitcoin. And it's very interesting that, you have wrapped Bitcoin on Ethereum. That's more than $10 billion market. It might be even bigger today with the Bitcoin all-time highs. And that basically shows that there's demand for it. I mean, Ethereum DeFi, prediction markets, all of that have shown there's a massive demand for it. Now, where Bitcoin on Ethereum, of course, comes with a lot of different trust assumptions. like when you think about it, it's a very centralized solution. It's not censorship resistance at all. And so the actual market for something like a wrapped Bitcoin on Bitcoin itself would be like multitudes bigger. The question is, why didn't that not take off yet? And I think it comes down a lot as well to user experience, both on the builder side and the user side. When you think about a layer, is it a layer 1 or a layer 2? It is basically a two-sided marketplace. On the one hand, you have the builders, so basically the people who build smart contracts, who build infrastructure. And on the other hand, you have the users. And so you have this two-sided marketplace, and you need an absolutely really good user experience for the both sides. I think for Rootstock, it is EVM compatible. It's not fully equivalent. So it's not as easy as just copying your smart contract from Ethereum and then deploying it on Rootstock. There's still like some changes, which is definitely a hurdle. Also for the users, it's very hard to actually get your Bitcoin on Rootstock. It's not super easy. It's a little bit complex. And so that has definitely hurt the demand. And then, of course, you also mentioned Liquid. I think Liquid ties into the EVM. So that's where you see the EVM might be the winning virtual machine. So for Liquid, it's really hard to actually build applications there because there's no infrastructure. Think in the beginning, especially think about like wallets, think about institutional cold wallet providers, think about subgraph providers, think about block explorers, think about your MetaMask. And so there's a lot of infrastructure that's been built around the EVM that doesn't exist yet on like a Liquid. Besides that, think about building smart contracts. I mean, the tooling, etc., to build Ethereum smart contracts today is massive. There's so much you can use. There's so many different examples of what is safe already, and that doesn't exist on Liquid. And so there's a lot of network effects that play into it. So yeah, we just haven't seen it yet. I do hope absolutely that someone will break this market open because it's absolutely needed if you want to move to a world that runs on Bitcoin as the money. But I genuinely believe that will happen. Absolutely.
Yeah. It's interesting what you were saying. I completely agree that like the base infrastructure is not just like the layer 1. It's also like all of the primitives built on top, like the subgraphs, the interoperability, like protocols, the bridges. That is also like something that's very very important. And going back to something that you were saying also is that you 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 said again that like Bitcoin had more liquidity on Ethereum than it has on the Lightning Network, but actually like one even worse use case of Ethereum of Bitcoin than wrap BTC on Ethereum from a custodial perspective would be the ETFs, and that has even more traction. So yeah, so like I guess right now we're living in a world where like the base money layer is very decentralized. It's perfectly optimal, but right now all of the usages that have been built around the utility of that decentralized money have been either centralized or completely custodial.
Yes. I consider that by far the biggest risk we face in Bitcoin today, actually. I think there is almost no one talking about it because it's not popular today. But all the Bitcoin moving towards ETFs and even the governments are by far the biggest risk. This whole vision where we believe in like every person in the world being able to save their money on chain, having full self-custody of their Bitcoin is becoming harder and harder when you think about it. There's now 1 million Bitcoin out of the 21 in ETFs. And that's only over like, the last 11 months. What if you think 4 years from now, 5 years from now, is there going to be 5 million Bitcoin in the ETFs? That seems not too crazy. But if you have 5 million Bitcoin in ETFs, that is absolutely a big risk to Bitcoin. Besides that, we wanted to separate money and state. Now, of course, what we see happening in reality is a lot of governments are starting to buy or going to buy Bitcoin. There's a lot of talk these days about the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve, the BSR that the U.S. government will start to build. They want to build at least 1 million Bitcoin, which is a lot as well. And so maybe we end up in a world where eventually all the Bitcoin ends up in the hands of ETFs. custodians, and central banks. At that point, we have kind of lost of our big vision of Bitcoin. At that point, Bitcoin is just a digital version of gold. The function of gold you have today is it sits in a bunker somewhere in Fort Knox and just plays a role as safety assets for a lot of governments and for a lot of people. Um, and if that's the future of Bitcoin, I think we have lost. I think Bitcoin can be something way bigger, can be a native currency of the internet, can be the actual money people uses, can be so much more than just a digital gold. And so at this point, I think we're at crossroads in Bitcoin. Either Bitcoin will play the role of just a digital gold and nothing more, or we can form it into like actual global digital money, the native money of a global permissionless internet. And so I think and I hope and I will work extremely hard to make that second vision happen. I think we need to create applications on Bitcoin. I think we need to create demand on Bitcoin so that actually that Bitcoin in the ETFs will flow back to Bitcoin on chain. We need to bring back more demand on chain because today I think people feel more safer to actually hold their Bitcoin in ETFs instead of trying to mess with private keys and like custodying itself. Like there's a lot of risk involved. Like what if you lose your keys? What if you die and you want to pass it to someone else? And so Bitcoin in the ETFs for a normal person in the world sounds very safe. But of course, there's a lot of risks involved with it. There's governmental risk, there's like risk, and so on. And so we need to bring Bitcoin back on chain and back online. And this is a very crucial cycle for it. And I hope enough applications get built, get enough demand on Bitcoin that actually happens.
Yeah. We'll get back to Bitcoin and the bigger picture in a moment, but I want to zoom in on Botanix and its latest developments. Can you talk a bit about like what you're currently working on and what the roadmap looks like in the next months?
Absolutely. So what we're building is the first step of what we call the Spiderchain. So we want to launch with 15 different decentralized sequencers of the layer 2. So we're more or less complete with that. We're doing the final testing now. We will take that to testnet very soon, so probably public in the next 2 weeks. That is the final test of stability test, basically, of the network. And then we will do the audit and bring that online. So this will be, I think, a very easy user experience for people to bring their Bitcoin on chain onto an EVM, then use your Bitcoin on the EVM into like any type of application. This will also be the first censorship resistant layer 2. Like this will be globally distributed across 15 different jurisdictions in the world. And we will go online in mainnet in probably like 3 months or 4 months, like after the audit is completed. And that's when we will go online with fully functional DeFi ecosystem. So think about all the infrastructure providers will be there, the big ones that you know on Ethereum. Think about your biggest, most favorite applications. You'll be able to do it on Bitcoin. And we hope that the rule of law that says basically liquidity begets liquidity, any application that is built on Bitcoin should be bigger than anywhere else. And then we hope that that plays out. But that's a little bit how the next few months are looking like. It's looking really good. Getting really excited about it.
Nice. So, in like 3 to 4 months, we'll see mainnet with 15 node operators. What does the roadmap look like in the future when you're going from like 15 node operators to potentially like an infinite number of node operators that will constitute uh, this network of multi-sigs, decentralized network of multi-sigs? And what does Bitcoin staking, what type of role does Bitcoin staking play in getting there?
Yeah. Well, step number one is launch with 15 different node operators. So they will secure the multi-sigs. We will run one ourselves and basically 14 other different partners. After that, basically, there is a very clear roadmap to like 100. you can expand what we call the federation from 15 to 100. Now, of course, that expansion to 100 takes in a lot more like management. Like, what if you need to do an upgrade or a soft fork, and basically instead of 15, it becomes 100 different people. And so at that point, you actually become already like very, very decentralized. After 100, it will take a bit longer time because that's basically when the functions of the Spiderchain will kick in. And so from 15 to 100, super clear, basically expand the federation, vote in new node members, and basically keep in adding new numbers to up to 100. After that, you develop the Spiderchain mechanisms that kick in, and then you can start adding from like 100 to like 10,000. And at that point, you basically are ready to fully become permissionless. And as the first part of the question, for Bitcoin staking, that will evolve as well. So in the initial phases, we will start with a proof of authority. So all the nodes will basically run as a trusted federation. We don't expect any of them to be able to stake. Now, users will be able to already stake using liquid staking tokens, very similar as we've seen already play out. And so you'll be able to get Bitcoin yield. We'll definitely come back to that later because this is something unique that doesn't exist yet. But basically, the users will be already able to like stake Bitcoin in the beginning. It will provide yield, but it has no security function. Then we will ask all the different node operators to actually stake Bitcoin. That's when staking kicks in. So you move from a proof of authority network to a proof of stake network. And then basically we keep increasing, like the more nodes come online, the more stake comes online. And then you can basically increase to 10,000 different nodes with a big amount of Bitcoin being staked. Eventually, when there's enough Bitcoin staked is when you can go to a fully permissionless network. One interesting aspect a lot of people often forget about staking is if you don't have enough Bitcoin staked, you are very much at risk. So if there's only like 1,000 Bitcoin stake, anyone with a lot of Bitcoin can basically attack the network. And so you need sufficient Bitcoin staked to be able to be secure.
And you need that Bitcoin, that staked Bitcoin, to be very distributed as well. Like, you don't want just Michael Saylor staking its Bitcoin.
Exactly. So ideally, to avoid what you call Sybil attacks, is that you have this whole stake basically distributed to the bigger amount of nodes as possible, so that you don't have a single operator that basically controls the network. And that's actually as well why we do this like scaling program. Like in the beginning, you can select 15 different entities that are all separate entities. And then you basically know that those 15 are fully separate. Even when you go to 100, you can absolutely ensure that these are all 100 different parties. So you already start with a somewhat decentralized set. Now, longer term, the cool thing about Bitcoin, it's the most decentralized asset. And so eventually you'll inherit that property of Bitcoin itself. One of the big issues when launching a proof of stake as a layer one is all the stake will be with a handful amount of people. And so that's very much at risk. Today, Bitcoin, the asset, is the most decentralized asset in the world.
100%. Going back to like the initial bootstrapping phase, when mainnet launches, how do you plan to attract builders on the Botanix layer? What is your, I would say, like your acquisition plan for to attract like DeFi builders, and also like all of these primitives builders, like you mentioned Subgraph at the beginning of those of the podcasts. How do you make sure that all of these builders come to make a Botanix as stable in the future as possible?
Yeah, that's a very good question and a very difficult question as well. There's a lot of different approaches to attracting builders. The funny thing is we take a very pure and ideological approach. Like we don't really believe in grants. That's more like hiring money. They're not there. They don't believe in the vision or the ideology. And we take a very visionary approach in essence, which is the harder approach, but it's also the more longer term sustainable approach. So we don't really have any incentives for builders to come over. However, what we can provide is the biggest liquidity pool in the market. The biggest liquidity pool in the market is Bitcoin. And so this is an access for any builders in the space to exactly copy paste the same smart contracts or build new smart contracts or new applications and actually bring them to Bitcoin. And so this is an expansion of their user base. If you are an Ethereum application today, your user base is limited to Ethereum users and the Ethereum ecosystem. If you can expand to Bitcoin, not only can you expand your massive user base, you can also expand your capital. And so in essence, a lot of the builders already have a massive incentive right there in the market to basically move to Bitcoin. What's been missing is an infrastructure to make it absolutely easy. And so that's basically the vision. A lot of people in the crypto space, especially in the beginning, less so in the later years, are very ideological driven. Like we actually want to see this world happen. And so this part of ideological vision of having a decentralized layer 2 for DeFi running fully on Bitcoin is a very attractive vision, especially if you also think about the company and there is a big, massive market with a new user base that is basically untapped. And so bringing all of these items together basically brings you a very interesting and good business case.
Nice. And so going back to like I would say the longer term vision for Botanix and how it enshrines itself into Bitcoin, what do you see the layer become? Do you see it become like a base, like technological stack for other people to build experiences on top of it, or do you see it as like the final scaling layer that will be the end all be all layer for like uh, DeFi and expressivity on Bitcoin?
Yeah, when I think about how this whole Bitcoin experiment scales to the global financial system, global economy, and 8 billion people, how I think about it is you have Bitcoin on the base layer, absolutely decentralized, 10-minute blocks, and the most secure there is. I think that is the most important base layer. Besides that, if you think about scaling, it makes sense that for the financial system, for something that needs to be extremely censorship resistant, you have a second layer. It doesn't have to be as decentralized as Bitcoin on the base layer that can be run by every person in the world. It can be run by the second layer, can be run by every company in the world, right? So something like the Botanix, the decentralized layer 2, can be run by every company or bigger entity or whales in the world. You put that on like a 5-second block time. So you go from 10 minutes, extremely decentralized, to like something on a layer 2, still very decentralized, much, much faster, but not yet 0.1 second block times, like 5-second block times, which is perfect, sufficient for that global financial system. Besides that, you have the Lightning Network, fast prepayments. I'm quite sure there will be other layer 2s that will find product market fit in their technology niche. I think for us, we want to be that global infrastructure layer for a decentralized financial system. I think we can deliver that to Bitcoin. I think that has to exist on Bitcoin. And that's where I think we will go. Now, from us, Botanix, a decentralized layer 2 EVM, you can basically build a layer 3. So it's very similar if you think about Botanix as being Ethereum, the base layer. You can have rollups with 0.1 second block times. You can have rollups on a Botanix. And then you see this very interesting vision of scaling. You go from 10 minutes to like 5 seconds to like 0.1 seconds. And then each of the applications that you see in the world economy, in the global economy, will choose some of these layers. Like NFTs, like prediction markets can maybe live on the 0.1 seconds. Doesn't have to be fully censorship resistant. Sovereign ownership will live on Bitcoin, the base layer. There's nothing more secure and trusted at Bitcoin, the base layer. Financial system of like borrowing and lending, global stock markets, stock exchanges, tokenized equities will live on that second layer. You kind of want that to be more trustless than pure centralized rollups. And so each of the applications, every economy you think about in the world will choose some of these application layers.
Got it. I want to zoom back out on the bigger picture on Bitcoin. We talked a lot about like the how we see the space evolving in the long run, and the necessity for, I would say, like Bitcoin, the network being used and leveraged even more than Bitcoin the assets. Um, I want to I want to talk a bit about like the recent developments that we've seen uh, on Bitcoin, technologically speaking, and like I would say also even culturally speaking, the past 2 years. I think that like more than 2 years and 2 years plus ago, like Bitcoin culture was very ossified, very centered around like the asset. And ever since I would say like 2022, 2023, we've started to see more experiments being done even on the core layer one. Um, like for example, like inscriptions, runes, things like that. What do you think that had like a positive impact on the builders' mindsets in Bitcoin? Do you think this is like it frees the narrative of like building more and doing more and faster on the Bitcoin layer one?
Absolutely. I think this is really, really good for Bitcoin. I think it's unfortunate every new technology always comes with a lot of different scams, and also in now in the in a lot of activity that's being brought either on like the base layer, different tokens and others are gonna be more extractive of the whole ecosystem. But even if a few applications, a few layers actually really, really work and find that longer term product market fit, I consider it still a net positive, especially in the situation where we are today with 1 million Bitcoin in the ETFs, with governments, with central banks buying Bitcoin. We absolutely need more applications on the base layer. So this is absolutely really good. I think there's a lot more talks now about governance and soft forks. I think the more we can make these different applications and scaling solutions trustless, or trust minimized, the better it is. I think we're still far away from it. I think the consensus still needs to be found, but there's a lot of different solutions that are being talked about, and that is a good thing. I mean, we've had proposals like pipes or BitVM. These are exactly the right things we need. These are type of designs we need to basically make Bitcoin more trustless and more usable. So yes, I absolutely think this is a good thing.
Great. And yeah, talking a bit more about these software forks and upcodes that would be needed on Bitcoin, like such as covenants. Can you talk a bit about those and like why they are needed? They're still needed on the Bitcoin core code today. There's been some talks also recently about potentially like bringing back to life like an old upcode that was part of Bitcoin and then taken out by Satoshi in 2010. That's called Upcat. It seems like out of all of these, I would say like tech talks, Upcat is probably like the idea that has the most product market fit within developers at the moment. Can you talk a bit about like all of that and why it still matters for Bitcoin?
Yeah, I think there's definitely always the thoughts of like let Bitcoin ossify today. There's a few risks that are involved in that I think a lot of people underestimate. Like we have kind of lost the way to upgrade with a soft fork and introducing new upcodes. Like that is really hard to find consensus on that. We don't even know how to activate that soft fork today. And so over time, Bitcoin will always need soft forks, some kind of soft forks and upgrades. Like technology changes. What if quantum computing, for example, takes off? Then we need to soft fork in quantum resistant cryptography. And so you always need some kind of way to actually resolve bugs and other different ways. And so we need to keep that habit of soft forking every once in a while, because that's absolutely crucial security wise. So I think that's a security risk. Not never upgrading anymore, fully ossifying is a security risk. Like if we don't even know how to soft fork anymore, that becomes very dangerous for the base protocol. So that's a security angle. I think a second is, of course, if you can improve certain certain side chains or applications or scaling solutions, and you can improve that by introducing new opcodes, the benefits are definitely there. Like the same vision as Bitcoin is where we want sovereign custody, self custody for a lot of different people, where we want Bitcoin to grow to the global money. Bitcoin can make that happen. Now, of course, do we have to rush that? No, absolutely not. I think let's take a very conscious approach to like see which ones make sense, what the potential risks are, but we also have to take into account of the risk of not forking, which are also there. And so this is a very intrinsic balance that you need to take into account. The more Bitcoin grows, the more stakeholders there are. Like you have all the different Bitcoin holders, you have, of course, the node operators, you have, of course, the miners. And so there's a lot of different stakeholders, and the amount of stakeholders keeps increasing. With ETFs now on board, maybe soon governments, they will want to have a say in the vote. And so it will become harder and harder to actually soft fork. But yeah, I do absolutely think we'll do the right thing. There's a lot of smart people working on it, a lot of people trying to find consensus, discussing different risks, discussing different activation types. Yeah, quite excited. I think it's absolutely needed, but the right things are happening.
Yeah, very, very exciting times that we're living in. Uh, Going back to the concept of Bitcoin staking and how it plays a role in, I would say, like this Bitcoin modular expansion. Like, do you feel like this concept is like a net positive for the space? Bitcoiners have been like historically different discussion on the layer two. We've recently seen like a lot of new Bitcoin staking projects. How do you see Bitcoin staking playing a role? Do you think it will be like the global standard to give decentralized security to everything that's being built on top of Bitcoin? Tell me a bit about what you think.
Yes, a few points. Um, Yes, I absolutely believe, number one, that Bitcoin staking will give rise to decentralized security. I don't think this will be thousands of applications because that doesn't make any sense. It will be a handful at max. And the reason is you need very big amount of Bitcoin to actually make something secure. We discussed this earlier, but if you have an application secured by only like 200 Bitcoin, it doesn't make any sense. They will be massively at risk of any attack. So you need to have the amount of Bitcoin staked for a certain either sidechain or application to be big enough. And so that will reduce the amount of potential sidechains or applications to probably like a handful. Um, I do think it's very interesting how in Bitcoin we absolutely hated proof of stake a few years ago. And I think that mostly was because Bitcoin was so a big fan of proof of work on the base layer. And if you compare that to Ethereum, who want to go with the merge to to basically shift to a proof of stake, those were like opposites. They were like competition of each other. But if you look at the arguments of why Bitcoiners did not like proof of stake, a lot of it boils down to a few security aspects and then an economic aspect. The security aspects are solved if you build it as a layer two, which is very interesting. Like a lot of the issues about like randomness or VRFs are basically solved if you build it as a Bitcoin layer two. You can basically leverage Bitcoin's proof of work. Now, the second economic argument I fully believe in as well, like proof of work on the base layer for your asset is a decentralizing trend. Over time, proof of work ensures that the base asset gets more and more decentralized, while a proof of stake on the base layer actually has a centralizing trend. If you have the same amount of coins, over time, the stakers will get a bigger and bigger percentage of the same amount of coins because it is not a leaking system. There's no money flowing out towards electricity. And so the economic argument is fully valid. But again, it's not valid if you build it as a proof of stake, as a Bitcoin layer two. And so proof of stake on a layer 2 is completely different in a lot of different aspects, security-wise, economic-wise, than proof of stake on a layer 1. And so you can see the sentiment slowly changing in the Bitcoin world. Well, probably 100% was opposed to proof of stake. People are starting to realize that there's actually also really good things about it. And so yeah, very excited to actually see that play out, see a Bitcoin staking economy exist. Besides that, Bitcoin staking will also give yield. I mean, there's a multitude of Bitcoin staking solutions available today. Us as Botanix will create Bitcoin yield. Basically, all the gas fees on the EVM are in Bitcoin, and they will accrue back to the stakers. And so this will create Bitcoin yield for the very, very first time ever in a open, permissionless, trustless way. I think there's so much demand for Bitcoin yield that yeah, this will be very, very interesting to see play out.
To wrap things up, I would like to ask a series of final questions. My first one would be like, how big do you think the Bitcoin staking market will be in 5 to 10 years?
Well, let's assume that by then Bitcoin is probably like a $10 trillion market, which is very similar to gold.
In amounts of Bitcoin staked. Let's not worry about the price.
Um, that will be in the millions.
In the
Yeah.
millions. Second last question. Outside of Bitcoin staking, what is one thing that you're excited about in Web3?
I think a few things. I think more applications reaching product market fit is really cool to see. Like prediction markets massively reach product market fit. So that was cool to see. I think more users coming on chain. I'm a big fan of stablecoins today. Like stablecoins are a safe haven for a lot of people in the world today. And they bring people on chain. I want stablecoins to be a funnel into Bitcoin, but we'll get there. And then I really like the developments on Bitcoin itself. So there's a lot of research going back into how to actually scale Bitcoin, a lot of activity. So those are probably three big areas I'm very excited about.
Great. Yeah, it's usually Bitcoiners love to say stable coins because I would say it's the one of the first like escape valves for people in the global south or any place on earth where there is high inflation. Before we wrap things up, like can you tell the audience like where they can find out more about you, about Botanix, learn about the Spiderchain, all of this good stuff?
Absolutely. So the company is called Botanix Labs. You can find us on Twitter under that handle. You can find us on LinkedIn. You can find us on the Discord. You can find us on Telegram. And those are the official channels. Website is botanixlabs.xyz. I think if you're watching and you believe in like the global vision and ideology of Bitcoin, definitely try out your Bitcoin on any of these applications. It's absolutely needed. Like we're at risk, so this is my ask. Like use it, use your Bitcoin, create that, help us create that Bitcoin economy.
Great stuff. To the audience, thank you so much for listening. We'll see you in the next one. And Willem, thank you so much for your time. It was great talking to you. And I hope we can chat more off screen.
Absolutely. Thank you, Anker.